Good evening. I'd like to call to order our meeting of the Board of Adjustments for August 24th. If we could have a roll call, please, ma'am.
Ms. Turner?
Present.
Mr. Burris?
Present.
Mr. Urbowski?
Here.
Ms. Rich and Ms. Simon are out today.
Okay. Thank you. So we have Mr. Jeremy Simon here for our legal counsel. If you could please provide our quasi-judicial announcement and swearing into the speakers.
Yes, ma'am. And before we get to the quasi-judicial announcement, just for everybody's knowledge, tonight's panel will consist of 3 members of the Board of Adjustments instead of the usual 5. That means that a unanimous vote of the panel would be necessary for any kind of decision. So any applicant does have the right to request that their application be heard by a panel that does not require a unanimous decision. Does any applicant here wish to pull their application from tonight's agenda and have it rescheduled? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and explain the quasi-judicial procedures. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. Importantly, the board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. And having said that, do any members of the board wish to disclose any ex parte communications or conflict of interest regarding or relative to any applications on the agenda tonight?
Yes, I actually, over a month ago, when this application number 22-72, when it was first brought before us but pulled by the applicant, one of the representatives of the applicant had contacted me, knowing me personally, to let me know that the project was going to be before our board. I said, thank you for letting me know, and we have sunshine laws. Have a good day. So.
Sounds good. Do you think that conversation would have any impact on your ability to adjudicate the issues fairly and legally?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So if we can actually, with our Mr. Simon, if anyone wishes to speak tonight,
of course.
whether as an applicant or someone who wants to express their concerns one way or the other about any applications, if you could please stand and raise your right hand, and our counsel will swear you in.
Yes, thank you very much. Please rise to be sworn. Anyone wishing to speak tonight? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, so sworn. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to application number 22-72, which is a variance to reduce the required front and rear yard setbacks and to allow non-conforming lots of record to be built upon for the purpose of constructing 2 single-family homes at the location, the south side of Division Street, approximately 176 feet west of the Athens Street intersection, lots number 9 and 10. So if we can have Ms. Keene present on behalf of the city staff.
Yes. Okay, Allie Keene with Planning and Zoning. Again, this application is located on the south side of Division Street. It's outlined here in yellow on the screen. This property, as well as all surrounding properties in the immediate area, are zoned R60, which is a 1- and 2-family residential zoning district. There is some general and intensive business zoning along Athens Street to the east, and this property is approximately 1.5 blocks from the city's special area plan, which is the gray shown on this map. The applicants are here tonight requesting 2 different requests. The first is in regards to non-conforming lots of record. The Land Development Code states that if at any time the owner of a non-conforming lot of record owns adjoining land, the lots shall be combined to meet the minimum lot requirements. This property was originally platted as 2 separate lots. The applicant is here today asking the board to recognize the historic platted lot configuration, which is shown here in the image as lots 9 and 10, and as 2 separate buildable lots. They are also requesting a reduced front yard setback from 10 feet or to 10 feet as opposed to the required 20 feet, and they're also requesting a reduced rear yard setback of 5 feet as opposed to 20 feet. One point of clarification is originally the applicant did request a rear yard setback of 10 feet. They did amend their application to reduce that to 5 feet for the purpose of allowing a garage to be set back on the property. That amendment came after the staff report was prepared, so it still reflected the 10 feet. The revision does not necessarily impact staff's recommendation, and I did update this presentation tonight to reflect the 5-foot setback. And the purpose for these requests is for the allowance to construct a new single-family home on each of the lots. For the first request, the non-conforming lot, again, this property is in the R60 zoning district. The minimum lot area for a platted lot that was platted prior to the current land development code going into effect is 5,000 square feet. The historic lot configuration for this property results in lot 9 at being approximately 4,500 square feet in area, and lot 10 being approximately 4,250 square feet in lot area. It's important to note that both of these lots do meet and exceed the minimum lot width along the street, and there is no depth requirement for the R60 zoning district, so they're only non-conforming in terms of lot area. A little bit of site history. These lots were originally platted back in 1914 as lots 9 and 10 of the I.B. Reed's Tarpon Heights plat. This predates any sort of formal zoning requirements in the city. In 1944, the first land development code went into effect. This property was zoned R1, which required a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. So at that time of the initial adoption of zoning requirements, these lots became legally non-conforming because they were smaller than the required 5,000 square feet. There was an existing single-family home that was constructed on the property. It was on lot 9. That home was demolished back in 2008. And in terms of common ownership, based on information on the property appraiser's site, as well as according to the applicant, it appears that both lots 9 and 10 have been under common ownership since they were originally platted. Again, that predates the common ownership provision and the current land development code. They are also requesting reduced front and rear yard setbacks. The R60 zoning district requires a front yard setback minimum for the house of 20 feet and a minimum front yard setback for a garage of 25 feet. It requires a minimum rear yard setback of 20 feet. Again, they are proposing a front yard setback of 10 feet and a proposed rear yard of 5 feet. And this image is just portraying a conceptual lot layout that was provided by the applicant. One thing to note is they do meet the minimum side yard setbacks for both properties, which is 5 feet in the R60 zoning district. The applicant also provided just some conceptual renderings of the types of homes they're looking to construct on the properties, if approved. The top one depicts a conceptual 2-story option, whereas the bottom depicts a conceptual 1-story option. This part of the city is an older neighborhood in the community. Typically, these homes along Division Street were constructed between 1910 and in the 1920s. We did a visual overview and survey of the property from aerial photographs, as well as did some approximate measurements from aerial photography to give you some ideas of how the development pattern is on that street. The front yards for properties on Division Street range between 12 feet and 53-foot setbacks. It has an average of 16-foot setbacks along this street. And then when looking at the properties as well, the rear yards for a lot of the lots are typically more minimal in this area. We also looked at the typical home depths along Division Street. They range between 36 feet and 72 feet in depth, with an average of approximately 50 feet. And if the R60 setbacks, as they are written in the code, were required, it would allow for a home on these lots approximately 45 feet in depth if they basically took up the entire buildable area. There's a few land development code considerations with this application. The first is section 25.03E3 in terms of the garage setback in the R60 zoning district. Specifically in this zoning district, front-loaded garages are required to have a minimum front setback of 25 feet. The intent of this provision is to prevent any vehicle that may be parked in a driveway from overhanging a sidewalk or even projecting into the street. if the front setback variance is approved by the board this evening, we would recommend that a front-loaded garage still be required to be set back the minimum 25 feet to avoid this conflict. Another consideration of the code is section 38, which is yard encroachments. This section provides for various allowances for certain structures to encroach or go into a required setback. One particular that could apply to this situation is an unenclosed front porch is able to encroach up to 10 feet into a required front yard. With that, you have two sets of decision criteria. This is your non-conforming lot of record criteria and your setback variance criteria. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Boris?
Yes, I have a question. On page 2 of the non-conforming lot of record variance, it shows that the minimum lot area is 6,000 square feet, and yet you showed up there 5,000 square feet. Why is the difference?
Yes, so the R60 zoning district has two allowances. Typically, R60 requires a minimum 6,000 square foot. However, the code has an allowance for lots that were platted before the code was in effect, can be a minimum of 5,000 square feet. So that's where the 5,000 is.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Boris, or are we?
Yes, I have one more question. Why this document has two names on the top?
I'm sorry?
And two different names and two different dates?
I believe one of that's the affidavit. I believe one of them is the property owner and one of them is the applicant. And that's basically the affidavit is the property owner giving the applicant permission to have an application on this property on their behalf.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Obowski?
No questions.
I believe I have a few questions here. So you had in the site history, 2008, where there was a former single-family home on lot number 9 that was demolished. And so, but nothing had ever been built, to our knowledge, on lot number 10? Is that
Not
correct?
to our knowledge. We looked back at the old Sanborn maps to see, we tried to get an idea. We saw a demolition permit in 2008 for the existing home. In the Sanborn maps, we went far back as 1926, and we saw the one home on lot 9, but nothing on lot 10. So I believe there's only been one on that property.
Okay. And on the aerial of the schematic we wanted for the benefit of attendees. So how you had said that the application has since changed to now have a proposed, the requested 5-foot rear setback, and of course this, I understand you
Right.
had to adjust this. What brought about going from where did that 5 feet go from where we're looking at in our packet here? Did the depth of the proposed structure change, or was it a measuring issue? What happened here?
So I believe after talking with the applicant, their thought was with the garage, instead of having it right at the street and front loading, they could potentially put it towards the back, maybe side load or rear load. So the additional 5 feet allows them more flexibility to do so. It did not change their request for the 10 feet, just for the 5 feet. They did not provide an updated conceptual lot layout for that revision.
So those are probably some questions about the rear versus front load of the garage options that the applicant could potentially provide us some
I think so.
some details on. Okay, I appreciate that. And if I don't know if this is a question for you or the applicant, but what is the proposed depth of the structure?
I would defer the applicant on that.
Okay.
And just for clarification of my measurements of that, is I was just looking at the buildable area that would be allowed if you took off 10 feet or the 5 feet rear setback is what I was looking at.
That's where you got your
Yes.
45 foot. Gotcha. And the when you're talking about section 38.00, the yard encroachments, so talking about, being familiar with, walking and bicycling in that area, when you're talking about the unenclosed front porches, I feel like I have seen that kind of structure around in that area. What are examples of that?
So it'd be a front porch, and unenclosed, meaning that it could potentially have a roof covering or overhang above it, but couldn't be screened in, it can't be walled in, open. I believe the code has, and I can look that up for you, a minimum openness. I think I'll have to look up what the percentage is, but it can't be screened in. It's just a front porch.
Gotcha, just
But it does allow for a front porch that has a roof overhang.
to have a roof, but can't be, floor to room.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, that was my other question on there. I think Mr. Burris?
I have one last question. On the topographic and tree survey, I see several trees. Is there any plans on these two homes to be any trees anywhere?
There's certain requirements of the code for tree plantings. Obviously, if there's any trees removed, they have to comply with any sort of tree mitigation requirements of our code. That is all verified during the building permit stage. But again, I'll defer to the applicant if they have any plans for additional landscaping.
I see. Thank you.
Mr. Rabowski? Okay, so at this time, if we can have, if the applicant is present or a representative of the applicant to come and present information. And sir, I apologize, I don't know if you were sworn in earlier in the meeting?
No, I was not.
Okay, if you could please,
Absolutely, sir. If you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you
I
God.
do.
Thank you.
if you could please state your name and address for the record?
Nick Mavromatis, 213 High Street, Tarpon Springs.
Thank you. So did you have any information that you wanted to present?
Well, I just heard a little bit of what the lady read there regarding the size. I think you asked about the size of the structure.
The depth, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And I cannot answer that question. I don't have that information with me, and I don't believe there's any detail on that. Because this was something that we sent in to try, and it's a suggested design. We know that, we may get an approval, we may not, and we may have to adjust accordingly. So I don't know what other information, unless you have specific questions that I can answer.
Okay, well, perhaps maybe if you could expand upon the information that Ms. Keene had mentioned regarding the garage front versus rear loading options, as that would, based upon the staff report, would have a potential impact on the front variance.
Well, I think that the whole idea is there to try and stay further away from the front property line and have parking in the rear, because I think there's something about no parking in front of the, is that correct, Ally?
Correct.
So that was the idea with that, to get away from having, I believe y'all call it term front loading with the garage and it coming to the rear. So that would be like a common, I believe it was an idea, was the common driveway, I think, through the center, and I'm not positive on that, to be able to get back into the garage.
Okay, and I can see that that would be something that, of course, would have to go through
Yes.
city staff with permitting if you're talking about and I'll defer to Ally on that, Ms. Keene,
Yes.
about the logistics of almost like a shared,
Yeah, y'all have done it
Path.
before.
sir?
Y'all have done it before, recently.
So, Mr. Boris, do you have any questions of the
Yes, I have
applicant?
one question. Is there a sidewalk on the side on Division Street, side of the property?
I don't know.
There is? So if they want to extend it, you want 10 feet in the front. Where are you going to put the sidewalk?
In the front of the property, whether it's there now, isn't it? Isn't that what that gentleman just
Not
said?
according to this.
Looking at this
Can't see it.
schematic,
There's
Ms.
a
Keene?
sidewalk that dead ends right at the property, I guess. Is that it?
Might be the aerial photo
Yeah, I'm not sure if the
image.
area will be close enough.
So is that the tree
There is an
shading?
existing sidewalk. I believe this is the sidewalk right here. Typically, the sidewalk, just for clarification, is constructed within the public right-of-way. So the setbacks are measured from your property line, which would be on the other side of the sidewalk. If there is not a sidewalk in front of this property, that is a requirement for the applicant to construct a sidewalk, and that's verified again at the building permit stage.
Which could potentially mean that you're talking from the edge of the sidewalk to the beginning of the structure. I mean, if a sidewalk is, what is the sidewalk?
3 feet?
I think it's believe it, on local, it's probably 4 feet.
Okay, so you're talking, the sidewalk is daggone near the front door.
So again, the sidewalk is typically so this yellow line is generally where the property line is. A sidewalk is constructed in the public right-of-way, which is on the other side. So
wide
setback is measured from property line.
Like on that north side.
Correct, yeah. I don't have a closer photograph, unfortunately, but yes, so it's in the public right-of-way.
Because I believe in that area, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the sidewalk, pretty much, you have the street, curb, sidewalk, it's all one continuous. It's not like a newer subdivision that has the swath of grass.
I'll pull it up and I'll verify. And if you want to keep asking questions, I'll pull it up on Google.
Okay. Mr. Rabowski, any questions of the applicant? I have a feeling that we probably will be coming back and forth from Ms. Keene and the applicant and representative to get some questions and clarifications here. So hold tight for us. Don't go anywhere. So at this time, if there are any public comment, if anyone would like to come and speak about this application, please come to the podium. And if you haven't been sworn in,
Name and address.
have you been sworn in, sir? Or-
Sir, do you solemnly
Good
swear
evening, my name is
from...
Deacon Schmidt.
Thank you, sir. Do you swear, have you been sworn in? I'll swear you in.
I was here and swore in before, I'll do
Oh,
it again.
okay, good. No, you're good.
Fine, if you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Deacon Schmidt, I live in 542 Division Street. I believe I'm the closest neighbor to the subject property. This lady whose name I missed, I'm sorry, did say that if any time the owner of such non-conforming lots owns 2 adjoining lots, then they shall be combined to meet the minimum standards of the code, which has been in effect for these properties for quite a long time, since the original house was built, the original one house was built on Lot 9 in 1914, I believe you said, or perhaps that was when they were platted. The lots, according to current code, are required to have 5,000 square feet because of when they were platted. Neither has that. One is 4,579 square feet. The other is 4,329 square feet, calculated from the survey that was provided with the application. The houses themselves, calculated from the next slide over, which is granted a rough plot plan. The house on the western lot, Lot 9, is estimated to cover 2,735 square feet of the lot, which is 60% of the lot. On Lot 10, the home that's proposed for that is estimated to cover 2,532 square feet, which is 59% of the lot. On Division Street, the average square foot of coverage of the lots is 2,029 square feet, which is just under 30% of the lot coverage. The maximum is 2,148 square feet, which is 40.8% of the lot. So these are significantly more than the rest of the lots on Division Street. Next door on Spruce Street, the average square foot coverage is 1,700 square feet, which is 25% of the lot. The average on Grand Boulevard is 1,799 square feet, which is 28% of the lot. So these houses are proposed to cover dramatically more of the lot than the rest of the houses in the 2-block radius around. When I did these calculations, I went down to Hope Street and calculated a couple of the lots that face Hope Street and also up to Athens Street, down as far as the extent of Grand Boulevard and Spruce Street. There also, as are shown on that picture right there, there are some very large old trees on these two lots. Right now, with an open lot, and it's sand. The water percolates through it when we get a lot of rain. And we get a lot of rain, as you know better than I probably. Apparently, there has been an ongoing issue at the corner of Athens and Division Street with runoff. I think that that would be significantly exacerbated by these two houses being built and so much of the lot being covered, because this is only the house that's covering roughly 60% of the lot. It takes into account nothing of the driveway or anything like that. That's really all I have to say. I can provide additional detail for pretty much any property around there if it's available on the county's website, because I've spent a great deal of time over the past couple of weeks looking. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else want to make any comments this evening?
Hello. Artemis Kousathanis, 541 Division Street. I'm also kitty corner to the property that's being proposed. You know, my concerns are also there's a lot of issues on Division Street with parking. It would add a lot more cars on the street. I've been hit twice on Division Street, which is a very narrow street to begin with. I've actually seen the waste management side swipe a car, so it's a very narrow street. And adding two homes with 2,000 square feet or 1,800 square feet with, you know, multiple families, there's probably going to be an additional 4 to 6 vehicles that are going to be parking on that street. There's also a big issue with the plan as far as if they do, they were talking about how they would load vehicles into the properties if they were to park off the street. That's a little bit of a concern. If there's enough room, again, we eliminate more street parking, that's an issue. And also the front the rear setbacks and the side setbacks. The front setback, I know that you said that the average was 12 feet from the front. I live on the street. I measured 17.5 feet was probably the closest house that I found from their front porch to the sidewalk. I didn't see anything that was remotely close to 10 feet. So these two homes would project out past the frontage of all the other homes on the street, on both sides of the street, by at least 10 feet, which of course would not be appealing in the neighborhood. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for coming. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share?
I've already been sworn in.
Thank you,
My
sir.
name is Demetrius Mostopoulos. My address is 216 High Street. But I have recently purchased the property across the street, 553 Division Street, and just had the closing recently. Like Artemis said, the street is narrow and the parking is an issue when you have cars parked in the street. And with most changes, there's going to be pros and cons. I'm all for splitting it into 2 lots and putting 2 homes there, but the setback needs to be at least 20 feet on the front to allow driveways and parking on the property, and not have it 5 feet from the sidewalk. And you could look at the homes on there too. They do look like they're at least 15 feet back. I didn't measure any of them, but they do look further back. I was just at the property there today. So the concern would be the parking, and you could see in that picture there's probably 4 cars parked at the corner there already, and it just will make both corners have cars parked there, so we'll just have the whole street with parked vehicles. if there's no accessible parking on the property. You know, if the garage is in the back, then maybe there's some flexibility, but once you change the setback, then do you have a means to stipulate and say setback, but there must be a garage in the back with a driveway, or the setback is changed to 5 feet, but we don't care, there's no garage on the property at all or any driveway at all, and then it forces street parking. So the setback would be my concern on the front end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for coming, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening? Okay, so then we will close public comment at this time. Yes, ma'am. You would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
So,
If you could just please state your name and address for the record, please.
Arian Skrebitz. My current address is 8208 Rambui Road, Spring Hill, Florida.
Have you
Thank
been
you.
sworn, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, I just wanted to bring up a lot of information about the property because it seems like some of the information isn't really what it is. A lot of those trees that you see there are trees growing from the other house. They're not growing from the inside of the yard. The only tree that's on there is probably about 20 years old, and that was there when I lived there about 20 years ago. It was this big. So these are trees that have been there forever and a day. A lot of them are new, and the ones that are cropping up in the yard are the new ones. The ones that are on the other side of the driveway, where the fence is that goes into the other property, that's where the trees are. So it's not quite as responsible for climate change as we'd like to think. So the water that goes down from the road all over Athens Street has nothing to do with the trees that are on Division Street. It has to do with the fact that the property on Division Street is at one of the highest points that there is in all of the Sponge Docks area. That's one of the few properties that really doesn't require insurance because it will never flood because it's at the highest point. So that's a really good advantage as far as having a lot of water come down your street and take over. So the house that was on there was always on there. My grandparents lived there, my parents lived there, I lived there, my husband and I lived there. So we were there for a really long time. The house that we were in was practically right on the top of the house that was next to us, like we were within hand's reach to grab each other. So this variance that everyone's talking about, these giant houses that everyone's imagining, I really don't see it happening. What I see happening is some normal-looking houses. What I've been told that we're going to be building there are some beautiful houses that belong in the neighborhood. And it seems like a lot of people have been getting in line to try and make a big deal about this. And I'm just someone who's trying to sell some property. I don't really understand what the big deal is. I understand we got variance questions, but if you really want to go up and down all that street, we've got townhomes there, we got homes on the canal. There's a lot of excuses were made for a lot of people to build a lot of beautiful places down there. And so I really just don't understand why, after all these years we've had this property, not a one person has ever come up and said, let me buy that property from you. I'm interested in your property. Not a one person has called me or my mother to maybe even discuss any of the problems they have with all this stuff. No one has contacted us at all. And some people here I know well, and they know who I'm talking about. And they didn't do me well as a realtor. And I think that one person ought to really apologize to us and ought to really just let things happen, because they had a chance to buy it, other people had a chance to buy it, and the only person that really came through with a contract is Leon. So I'm really trying to figure out What is so complicated about trying to keep up a neighborhood that has not been looking well over the years? I have lived here for a very, very long time, and these neighborhoods didn't look so great. And it's been taking a long time to get these neighborhoods back up again. And everything's looking awesome, so I don't know why I can't have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Chair, may I suggest, since Mr. Schmidt spoke and he submitted a letter to the city,
Thank you for
this
pointing that out.
person, Lois Barth, apparently hasn't had a chance to speak. Would you mind at least reading this into the record?
I certainly can. I can read that into the record. We do have one more public
Oh.
comment. I will, can I steal that from you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sir, have you been sworn in?
I have not.
If you could raise your.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Reminded me.
Thank you.
I'm at 716 North Distant Avenue here in Tarpon Springs. My mother-in-law owned 553 Division Street until recently, last January when she passed. We just did sell the house to the new owner. This property, was interested in purchasing this property. We did talk to the owner at one point about purchasing it, but the purchase price was too much. We were looking to put a conforming house on that property, a single house, to do that. So we have had interest in that property. It was just the property price was too much. So I wanted to establish that first, that there has been interest in the sale of that property. The second thing is, you asked about the sidewalk. There is a sidewalk on that side of the property. There is a small grass setback of probably about a foot, then the sidewalk, and then another part, and then there's a brick wall that's still existing there from the original house. I did also want to say that those houses were very close together. The original house did set way back on that property, very close to the neighboring property, so that was not unusual for that property, and that is how that property was set there. The traffic on that street is horrendous. If you get anybody having a birthday party, forget it. There's always 4 cars parked at the west end of the street. There's always 4 cars parked at the east end of the street every day. That's already there. That's not counting for any deliveries. If you get a delivery truck in there or whatever, I don't even think that the street sweeper comes down the street anymore because I just don't think that it's effective for him to get down there to be able to clean the street, and that causes a lot of problems. That's really what we wanted to make sure that we passed on.
So did you state your name into the record before you put your address?
I don't know. Thomas Galbo.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And as Mr. Hrabowski kindly reminded me, we did have an email submitted as a public comment, so if I may read this into the record for everyone's benefit. This is from Lois Barth. It says, for 14 years, I owned a house on Reed Street in the historic area of Tarpon Springs. I love the neighborhood and the neighbors and the neighborhood. There is a charm and comfort in the area that attracts those who desire a special place to live and owners who will treat their property respectfully. I have been informed of a request to rezone 2 lots on Division Street, number 9 and number 10. The applicant wants to build 2 houses in what appears to be a tight space by reducing the front and rear yard setbacks. This seems to be an affront to an immediate neighbors who with already established dwellings. It does not seem to fit the charm and character of the community, which attracts quality residents. The advantage only seems to be to the builder and is a form of greed. Homeowners do not want to sit in their house or yard and look a few feet away into someone else's personal space. I presume the current setback rules were established thoughtfully and for good reason, so why make an exception to them now in this one instance? It could set a precedence for building other houses around the town too tightly. High-density living is not desirable in the eyes of many who would be attracted to living in the historic area. Of note, I am a tax-paying member of Tarpon Springs. I now own a condo in the Green Dolphin community and am still quite interested in the quality of life offered to those who chose to live here. Thank you, Loris Bath. Thank you. So, last call. Come on up.
Okay.
You know the drill.
Yes, I was sworn in.
Okay.
My name is Alex Beckel. I live at 5716 Salt Springs Road, that's in Port Richey. I grew up in Tarpon. I'm a longtime ex-resident of Tarpon, and I know some of the people who are kind of opposed to this project. I just have one brief comment. It's kind of about the structure that was there before. The owner said that the house sat on the property in a way that isn't much different than what's being proposed right now. I was on Google Maps this afternoon, and if there's a history where you can look at old street view pictures. So if you go back to 2007, which is the first street view picture, you can see the way the original house sat on that property, and it really fits the look of the road. It sits way back. It sits probably 30 feet back. It sits further back than most of the houses, and it looks like it belongs. It looks like it conforms to the road. And I don't know if you can bring that up on the screen just so everyone can see what was there. It might help people make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I do have a question.
Okay. Yes, oh, wait,
Oh, we have another?
One additional question, if I may?
yes, sir?
I believe that one of your proposed amendments was to share a driveway between the two homes to provide for the possibility of rear loading the garages.
That it was something that was mentioned. The criteria and the application that is before us, it is very specific, and it is two parts. One is to the front yard setback, the rear yard setback, and allowing construction on non-conforming lots of records. When it starts getting into the details of is it one-story or two-story or pink or purple or those sorts of things, that's handled, you know, with the building construction department. This Ms. Keene does. So we're here. We have a very specific, narrow focus that's talking just about the setbacks and the non-conforming lot of record.
She's basically saying we can't consider the driveway.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a question.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Al.
Okay, all right, hold on. Last call. Okay, we will close public comment, and now let's have some additional questions for city staff. Mr. Hrabowski, and I have some as well.
Yeah, so what was the justification for needing these setbacks that was presented to you?
The justification from the applicant?
Yes.
Justification from the applicant was basically to allow to construct a home in similar size and format and layout as other homes. The reduced 5-foot rear yard setback was to allow flexibility to potentially move a garage back, to allow for further setback, potentially more parking on the site. But I would defer to the applicant for their true justifications.
Okay. So their justification is that they could help with parking issues by having this variance on the setback.
Well, pushing the garage back will prevent the issue that I had brought up in my presentation about having a shorter driveway. If someone parked in the driveway, it could overhang street or sidewalk.
Right.
Pushing it back allows for additional parking. Just for clarification, for any single-family residential property in the city, it is required to have a minimum of 2 on-site parking spaces. For single-family residential, that can include 1 spot in a garage and 1 spot in front in the driveway, but you have to have 2 spots on the property. So each lot would have to accommodate 2 vehicles, just for clarification on parking.
So they're going to have to do that regardless.
Correct.
Whether they got this variance or not.
Correct. The main point for staff bringing up the garage setback is the R60 zoning district specifically has a different setback requirement for a front-loading garage. So that additional 5 feet to a 25-foot setback allows for that parking in the driveway. Staff just wanted to recommend, if the board chooses to approve the front setback variance, that you consider potentially not applying that to a front-loading garage.
I mean, the thing that's puzzling me is the need for the requested variance rises out of the physical surrounding shape, topographical conditions, or other physical environment conditions that are unique to the specific property involved and which do not apply generally to the property located in the same zoning district. I don't know how this land is causing this. It's just because they want to do something different with the land, right?
So what I can,
I mean, it's not
what I
arising
can
out of the-
provide is staff's review of that criteria.
Please, because
yes.
the land is not different than anybody else's land on there. It's not,
Yes, and this, let me
I
make sure
don't
I'm at the
see
right
why
one.
they would need
You're referring to criteria 1, correct?
why does this thing keep?
Well, in regards to
Criteria
criteria
one.
1, this is
Yep.
staff's review of provisional findings.
Yeah.
We state that the need for the variance is due to the lots, which predate the city's zoning regulations, being smaller in lot area than what would be currently required under the current zoning requirements. That interpretation basically says we're looking at R60 as a district, not necessarily just this area. Typically, R60 requires at least that 5,000 square foot. So this is a unique property in that it is smaller historically than what would be required under today's requirements. So that's staff's interpretation of that criteria.
Interpretation, got it.
And for point of clarification, you know, for us and for, you know, we're usually not the popular board, I will say. So for those who've taken time out of their schedule to share their thoughts and concerns on this project. As we said, we're looking at multiple things here. So taking first with the non-conforming lot of record. Can you explain to us in layman's terms what makes this a non-conforming lot?
Sure. It's in lot area. So R60 zoning requires a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. Because each of these lots are less than that, that's what makes it non-conforming. These are historic platted lots. They've been 2 lots from the time of platting. However, the code has a provision about common ownership. If these lots are under common ownership, in order to recognize them as separate lots, that's why they come before the board for a variance request, to recognize that original configuration.
So we're recognizing that original configuration from 108 years ago, if my math is correct? Right, so 108 years ago, of course, we did not have the minimum 5,000 square feet. These are, you know, under that, which then by definition makes it a non-conforming lot of record. So given that, is it safe to assume, well, no, we're not assuming. Can you tell us if there are other lots
Exactly.
in this area that would be, by this definition, a non-conforming lot of record
Yes.
since 108 years ago?
Yes, I did not do a full
much
analysis of all the
everyone on
lot
that
areas, but several, yeah. Not all of them along the street. Some of them are a little bit larger.
Some are 5?
Yes, some of them
Really?
larger, but I didn't do a full analysis, but yes, there are lots just to the north
They're all pretty damn small.
are smaller.
So some are smaller, some are bigger.
Correct.
It's there in the mix, okay? And Mr. Boris, because
I
know
have
something
a
else.
question. Will the property have reasonable use if the variance is denied?
Let's see what staff said. All right. Okay, criteria 3. So criteria 3.
Public comment is closed at this time? Sir?
In the application itself,
Sir,
Sir,
you can say that there is
Sir.
reasonable use if this application is denied.
and just for purposes of the record, public comment has been closed for this particular matter. Thank you.
Again, I'll read from the staff report, our provisional findings. This is in reference to criteria 3. Literal enforcement of the minimum setback requirements would result in homes that could only be approximately 45 feet deep, less than the average home depth for other properties along Division Street. The reduced rear yard setback is consistent with other developed properties in the neighborhood and would allow for the home to be constructed that is in comparable size to existing homes in the area and is the minimum variance necessary to make reasonable use of the property. However, based on the historic development pattern of the neighborhood and yard encroachment allowances of the Land Development Code, staff is of the opinion that home layouts could be redesigned to have a larger front setback that is more comparable to the surrounding area. Based on the evidence available at the time this report was prepared, staff is of the opinion that this standard is met, or has not been met, I'm sorry, for the front setback variance, but it has been met for the rear setback variance.
Oh, splitting the baby.
It's loaded more than.
yes, so, and that's where, thanks for the clarification, and if I may, what I'd like to do is, you know, like I said, this isn't something that, you know, most of us typically encounter every day as to what exactly we, as a board, are presented with this application, what we are voting on, what we can consider, what we cannot consider. There's, like we were talking about before, there is this narrowly defined focus. So please, you know, Ms. Keene, Mr. Simon, stop, halt, correct me if I go astray here.
Yes, ma'am.
So what I like to do is if we can take what is being asked of us, you know, point by point here. So one is, I'm going to go a touch out of order here, where we're going to go with the allowing the non-conforming lots of records to be built upon. So we have these two lots that are non-conforming lots of record that Ms. Keene has shared the definition of what makes them non-conforming. So that would almost be like point one. So we can, the three of us, vote, do we approve of this being a non-conforming lot of record, which then can be constructed upon? We're good?
That's correct.
So then, all right. So then,
First, obviously,
sir.
we need a motion to.
Right.
Okay.
So the second point would be looking at the setbacks. So they are asking two different setbacks. One would be the front yard setback, which they are asking for a front yard setback of 10 feet. Whereas the current criteria, the zoning, the requirement is a 20 feet setback. They're asking for a 10 feet. So that's number one, would be, or excuse me, number two, that front yard setback. Number three would be our rear yard setback, which again, the criteria, the requirement for that is a 20 feet, and they are asking for a 5 feet. So that is the third one. And I believe we've covered all of that, because when if we're talking setback, we got the front, we got the rear, side. The sides, what they are proposing is not in need of a side setback.
Correct.
Either side. Okay, so these do not necessarily, by our board, have to be taken as a holistic package. We could say no to the non-conforming, yes to the front, no to the back, whatever mix that may be. So I just wanted to kind of make that
I
clarification.
can tell you right now, I do not see how number one and number three have been met of our review standards. I just don't see
Okay.
it.
And that is the other point when you're talking, thank you, Mr. Rabowski, about the review standards. So we have review standards which are following our land development codes, our, I'm losing the word right now, of where the 5 points come
These are
from.
established in the city's land development code.
So it is in the land development code, and those are, which you probably heard referenced, and there's different land development code criteria that have to be met for non-conforming lot of record, and then different review standards for the setbacks. So for edification of all who've taken the time to be here tonight, the review standards that we have to have as finding of fact for that non-conforming lot of record, again, that being, can we build on this lot platted at 1914, is number one, the lot consists of at least one entire lot of record on the effective date of this code. Two is the lot was not created in violation of a previous zoning ordinance. And three, the lot was not combined with a neighboring lot under common ownership in order to allow the existing improvements on the neighboring developed lots to meet applicable setbacks. So that's the criteria that we are looking at here if we wanted to have board discussion on these at this time. Mr. Boris, Mr. Rabowski?
Yeah, your number one point, I'm sorry.
Please.
That's all right. Your number one point goes back to my question. Is there reasonable use for the property? There is.
Well, that is the criteria that
That's
we
the
would be
other one.
looking at for our setback variance. So looking at number one, when we're talking about the lot consisting of at least one entire lot of record on the effective date.
Well, wait, he's talking about the review standards, so are you still wanting to talk about the non-conforming?
Yeah, we'll just, let's take non-conforming first, if that's okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
I don't have an argument with non-conforming.
So, non-conforming,
No problem.
how do you feel about the non-conforming? Did you want to review the three criteria there for
It's also up
non-conforming?
on the,
Oh, yes, and it's there in bigger print. Which Ms. Keene had reviewed, plotting 1914.
So we're going back to 1914.
Yes.
But things are changing, they have changed already.
Mm-hmm.
Why we have to decide that far back?
Because we are following the laws.
Maybe for some clarification, for these criteria for a non-conforming lot, the first one is the lot consists of at least one entire lot of record on the effective date of this code. And I'll read staff's findings for this one as well. The subject property was originally platted in 1914 as two separate lots in their current size and configurations prior to the effective date of the land development code. So any land development code in the city didn't exist when these were platted. The second criteria is the lot was not created in violation of a previous zoning ordinance. Again, the lots were in existence prior to the city's first zoning ordinance. It went into effect in 1944. Therefore, the properties were not created in violation of a previous ordinance. And then number three, the lot was not combined with the neighboring lot under common ownership in order to allow the existing improvements on the neighboring developed lot to meet applicable setbacks. First, this property is undeveloped. There's nothing on there, so nothing was dependent on another for setbacks, and according to the deed records, it appears that the two lots have been under common ownership prior to the city's first land development code and the provision being in effect, and the property is currently undeveloped.
So in layman's terms, if we were to vote yes in the affirmative to approve these being non-conforming lots of records, we're essentially stating that we are approving of this one parcel going back to the original 1914 plat of it being lot 9 and 10 to be built on. You could build a 200 square foot place. We're not talking at that point, what you're probably like, no, there's probably minimum sizes too. We're not talking setbacks at that point or anything like that. It's saying you can build, period, following other criteria.
Correct.
That's what that is. Okay. So can I see my paper back for the other
Yes,
points?
you may
Okay,
have, but-
so that's the non-conforming.
I still want to make the point that we're overruling any adjustments that were made in 1944 and so on and so forth. And we're going back to 1914.
Well, wait,
To base our
we're
decision?
yes, we're looking at what was platted in 1914 because that's when it was originally platted. It was platted before we had these requirements. So then the other, when we're talking about our front and our rear yard setbacks, point 2 and 3, we have the following 5 review standards that we have to have our findings of facts that we've talked about. One is the need for the requested variance arises out of the physical surroundings, shape, topographical conditions, or other physical or environmental conditions that are unique to the specific property involved and which do not apply generally to property located in the same zoning district. I know Mr. Hrabowski is wanting to say something.
It clearly is not met. I mean, there's nothing about that property that would force you to push your building towards the sidewalk. I don't.
And so you're in reference to the front variance request?
Well, either one, because neither one would have to be violated to build on this property. Because it's just they're rectangles, and so you put what, it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, so there we go. So there they are. So number 2 would be the conditions or special circumstances peculiar to this property have not been self-created or have resulted from an action by the applicant or with prior knowledge or approval of the applicant. So again, since we're talking vacant property,
Then it's self-created because they want to build something a certain way.
right. So then you have that literal enforcement of the requirements, and this is what Ms. Keene had reviewed, to where reviewing this, does this prevent them reasonable use of the property? Looking at the front yard setback request versus the rear yard setback request. And then conferring any special privileges, again, very similar theme as to what Ms. Keene had reviewed. What the front yard rear setback does not seem to have been met, but the rear is another story. And then will this substantially diminish property values or infringe on rights of others is on the other ones. So again, the staff recommendation on this, the feedback, which again, we don't always have to necessarily go lockstep, that's why the board exists, is the difference between front and rear in these situations.
I mean, even number 4 is granting the variance will not confer any special privilege that is not allowed for other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district.
And that's where, in studying this and hearing the feedback, I think it's something I've certainly noted is there didn't seem to be any question or concern either by city staff, the applicant, residents who have come out to express their concerns with this in regards to the rear yard setback. That seems to not be a point of contention, that in having the variance for the rear yard setback being smaller than what is required doesn't seem to be a point of issue. In my opinion, that's where I'm asking gentlemen to the left and right, and would be in harmony with existing structures in the
You're
neighborhood.
suggesting that we might give them one variance and not another.
Well, we've done it before, and we can certainly do that again. That's where there's front, there's rear, there's non-conforming.
Isn't
One,
it
two, three.
I'm sorry, isn't it
Sir.
against the norm to go from 20 feet to 5 feet?
Well, we
Where will-
think
where
about where
will
we've
we
been.
move the goalpost now? To 0? Is something is not making sense here?
It's a large ask.
It's a big ask. It is a really big ask, right? And that's where the other concern on the other side is the original ask was 10 feet versus 5.
It's irrelevant, still from 20 feet to 5. Never mind.
So there are the setbacks.
The other thing is the lot was not created in violation of a previous zoning ordinance. So why are we still going all the way back there, since there was no violation as the ordinances
Because there wasn't an
were
ordinance
changed?
when they were platted in the first place. There was no ordinance for it to be referenced to.
By the subsequent ordinances, they were not in violation of any previous one that came in.
So it's sounding to me, Mr. Boris, when we're discussing the approval of the request for making them a non-conforming lot of record to be constructed upon, does not seem that you have objection to that.
Yes, well, it still has my point that this one can be built in a different way than what they
Right,
requested.
right, and that's where, remember, the non-conforming part of the application is not how they are to be built, it's can anything be built, period. Not necessarily what's presented.
Yes, you can.
There you go, okay.
And the challenge is this has to be unanimous decision for them to get it. You understand? Because there are only 3 of us.
What will happen to the other 2 points?
Well, that's why I would like to suggest that we take this in 3 parts. The 3 parts being, number 1, the non-conforming lot of record, number 2, the front setback, number 3, the rear setback. 3 different motions.
Are we allowed to do that, to
Yes, sir.
break it up like that, or we can?
Yes,
We
sir.
have to vote as one piece?
No, you can, there's 3 variances being requested. The board is free to accept one variance, deny the other 2, or any combination thereof.
And we've done that on lots of
Okay.
applications.
All right.
So
What you gotta do.
may I ask for a motion?
Okay, I'm gonna say motion to approve the non-conforming lot of record.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the non-conforming lot of record. Roll call?
Mr. Urbowski,
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner.
Yes. So, now we have the front setback, again, knowing the criteria, the requirement is the minimum of the 20 feet. The ask is for a 10 feet. I think there were some really good points brought up about the driveway situation. We're not all driving those tiny little smart cars that look like golf carts, to where there are, I agree, some serious safety and parking and logistic situations that certainly impact others living in the area there on that street and driving and walking and riding their bikes in that area. Understanding, and again, criteria before us has nothing to do with garage, whether it's front load, rear load, sharing the driveway, none of those things. It's purely the setback. I personally am not comfortable with something that tight.
Motion to deny.
Second.
Okay, so we have,
Roll call.
on the floor, motion to deny the front yard setback. Do we have a roll call?
Mr. Urbowski,
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes. So then our third point is the rear setback. Again, same requirement of a 20-foot, and the ask is the 5-foot. And we actually had discussion of this a couple minutes ago.
Okay. So I make a motion to deny.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Oh, roll call, sorry.
Mr. Urbowski,
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes. So I do appreciate everyone coming out. The lots can be built upon, at least in making them non-conforming lots of records, whatever those setbacks may be. This is one of those situations where the applicant would have to go back to the drawing board and find a project that would fit working with city staff. I'm so glad people came out, and if I could put in the shameless plug for, look, we have vacancies on our board. So we are a fun group serving our community. So if you want to come and join us every month, please contact our city clerk, and she can talk to you about the application process for being a member of one of our volunteer boards.
I would
Good plug.
remind people.
Great plug, shameless plug.
I would remind people they have an out before we get started if they, you know what I mean, if they want a full board.
Oh, we did that,
I know.
yeah. So.
You could remind them.
We did. We did remind that, now understanding this is a unusual circumstance, we usually have 2 other board members. So this is why volunteering is so important. So we're gonna move on to our next application, which is number 22-73. This is a variance to reduce the required rear yard setback for the purpose of constructing a screened-in porch. Location is 1615 Stonehaven Way. If we could please have Ms. Keene give us the staff report, please.
Yes. Okay. This property outlined in yellow is off of Stonehaven Way. All the surrounding properties in this area are R70, which is again a 1 and 2 family residential zoning district. The applicants are here today requesting variance approval to allow for a reduced rear yard setback in order to construct a screened-in porch with a hard roof over an existing concrete patio. They're proposing a 13-foot rear yard setback, whereas they would be required typically a 20-foot rear yard setback in the R70 district. This is a survey of the property. The existing concrete patio is shaded in blue here. That patio currently is only 13 feet away from the rear property line. Again, they're requesting a variance approval to allow them to be 13 feet for screening that area in with a hard roof, as opposed to the required 20 feet. A couple considerations: the existing home on the property is only 25 feet away from the rear setback. If they were to construct a screened-in or covered patio area in their backyard, it could only be a depth of approximately 5 feet due to that 20-foot setback. Another consideration is there is an existing 10-foot utility easement along the rear of the property. The structure and the patio are currently would be outside of that easement area. A couple of considerations in the Land Development Code. First is Section 36.02C for pool screen enclosures, which I think you're all pretty familiar with. But open pool screen enclosures, so no hard roof, are permitted to have a minimum 5 foot or outside any easement for rear yards. If the hard roof was removed from the proposed screen-in porch, it could be treated similarly to a pool screen enclosure and would be permitted without variance approval. The applicant has indicated that having some shaded space in their backyard is pretty critical. So the hard roof is why they're here today. The second consideration is Section 36.01A for accessory structure setbacks. Structures that are less than 200 square feet in area are permitted to have a reduced rear yard setback of 5 feet or outside any easement. If this proposed porch was detached, it is less than 200 square feet in area. In a separate structure, it would be permitted to be as close as 10 feet to the rear property line due to the existing utility easement. Again, we did another little visual survey from aerial photography, and there are several homes in this neighborhood, in this immediate area, that have similar covered porches in their backyard. All the ones that I shaded in blue are the ones that have those existing porches. I also did very approximate measurements over the aerial photograph, and those are the numbers you see here of what those setbacks are. As you can see from this screen, I believe there's only one that's in conformance with the current code. Likely these were probably constructed predating, but right now there's only one.
On Saturdays, not saying, just saying. Judgment.
Again, here's your variance criteria, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. You actually answered some of my questions there. Mr. Boris, Mr. Urbowski, any questions
No, I'd
for
like to
Ms.
hear
Keene?
from the applicant if they're.
Okay, and you did clarify and remind me of the conversations we've had multiple times about what makes it a permanent structure versus the pool thing. So you're saying, if I'm understanding this correctly, so if it was detached, and detached by what, a foot? And
I believe the code has more than 2 feet. It's either 2 feet or greater than 2 feet.
so if they had a big uncovered gap of 2 feet, then they wouldn't even be sitting here. But that would be a little silly, wouldn't it?
Theoretically.
Gotcha. Okay, so thank you very much. If the applicant is here and would like to present or ask any questions, actually, we did have a question for Mr. Urbowski, if
Well,
the
I just
applicant's
want to hear
present.
what they have to say.
If you could please come forward, and I don't know if you were already sworn in or not earlier this evening? Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Christine Gasco, and I'm one of the applicants at 1615 Stonehaven Way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know if there was any additional information that you would like to share?
The actual overhang is what we're really looking for, the easement on. The screen itself is right at the edge of the patio, but to slope the roof so that rainwater doesn't gather, that's where it overhangs a little bit and comes into the setback area.
Understand. Thank you. Mr. Urbowski?
Thank you.
That was that. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for coming and for your patience this evening. So if there's anyone here that wanted to have any public comment regarding this application? None? Okay, so we'll close our public comment. Any other questions for staff before we move on?
No.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to approve. May we have a roll call?
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes. Enjoy your porch. All right, so last but not least, we have application 22-78, which is a variance to allow a fence to exceed the maximum allowable height at 1611 Coppertree Drive. Ms. Keene.
Okay, this application's in the same neighborhood as the last one, but it's off of Coppertree Drive. Again, outlined in yellow here on the screen, and the surrounding zoning is R70, 1 and 2 family residential. The applicants are requesting variance approval to allow a fence within a residential district to exceed the maximum height permitted, which is 6 feet. They are proposing to construct an 8-foot tall fence along their north side property line. This is an aerial shot of the property. The blue line is showing where they're proposing to construct the 8-foot tall fence. The applicant did provide several photographs that were provided to you in your backup materials. I pulled a couple of them here for you to look at this evening. The main reason for the request is there is an approximate 1.5 to 2.5 foot elevation change between the subject property and the adjacent property to the north.
Yeah.
These images are showing some of the existing fencing along the property line, and you can also see how the adjacent home in this second picture sits relatively higher than the subject property. Effectively, approval of an 8-foot variance would be approximately a 6-foot fence height from the neighboring property because of that elevation change. And here's your criteria again. I can answer questions.
Okay. Any question? I believe we have, Mr. Urbowski had mentioned we've had a very similar application before where there was almost like a gully in someone's rear yard, and if they had these standard 6-foot fence, it was really, I mean, that was a pretty deep one. It was
Right.
gonna be like a
It would've been-
4-foot fence. It would
Right,
have just been
right.
this
Yeah,
silly little nothing. So, given not everything in Florida is flat. So if we have the applicant here, who'd like to present? And you know the drill.
I haven't been sworn in.
All right.
If you could please raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could please state your name and address for the record?
Louis J. Coos Jr., 1611 Coppertree Drive, Tarpon Springs.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any information that Ms. Keene has, that has not been shared by Ms. Keene or in your packet that you'd like to share with us?
I don't think so. I think she covered everything. Excuse me. The pictures kind of explain a little bit of it, of course. It is a fact that with the height difference, if you're on their property looking into mine, their fence is right here. So
Right.
I have a big pool. This is for their benefit and my benefit.
Right,
Because, you know, I have a large family, 5 grandchildren, they're always over. Okay? Anyway, I think it would better the quality of life for both of us.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any questions?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak in regards to this application? Okay, so in closing public comment, no other further questions? If we can have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All right, roll call?
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes. Enjoy your fence.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you,
good night.
sir. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, so if we have our June 29th minutes, which have been presented, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Motion and second, roll call?
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes. Any staff comments? Anything we need to know?
I don't have any. I just want to thank everyone who provided input for the comprehensive plan. If you have any more comments that you want to provide, we'll still accept them.
It's on my desk.
Without calling you out.
Ah!
But if
you
you
haven't
want,
turned
if you
it
want
in?
to,
No, I didn't turn in
I
my
thought you'd
homework.
be the first one to turn
You were
it
the
in.
most
I
excited.
know, you would think.
It's okay. If you would like to
I
submit
thought
those
I'd
to
be
us,
the last one.
we're still sending them to our consultant for
It's
compiling.
legit on my desk at work. It's,
Just
Yeah.
bring it in anytime you're here. But so we just thank you guys for your continued input on that process. And then you already gave a nice plug about open positions on the board. So if you guys know anyone who's interested, we still are looking for applicants. We have not received any at this point.
we are trying.
And on that note, I'm term limited out in October.
It's about
I
time.
believe.
I
I'm
think
finally
so,
getting my.
So my recommendation is reach out to the city clerk just for verification of how that process
Yeah, I
works.
mentioned it last night
Okay.
at the BOC, so hopefully, yeah, I'll still talk to her, but
Yeah,
yeah, so I
just-
think,
just touch
Mine
base.
is coming up next
Oh,
year.
y'all are just leaving me hanging.
So we need applicants.
so I will be in the next meeting next month,
Mm-hmm.
but that's it, right? Or will I have to do October as well?
I'm going to have you talk to the city clerk.
Because, I mean, and as you know, there's, as charming as we are, there's a learning curve.
Yes.
Is there a rotation of members on different boards so we can just go around to help the situation?
I mean,
Well, so I did ask the city clerk if anyone had that as the Board of Adjustment as another board they're interested. Maybe it wasn't their first choice, and at this time, no. We did say if anyone that wasn't chosen for a board, if maybe they're interested in this board, and we just haven't gotten anything yet. We did send out a blast on Connect Tarpon Springs.
Very good.
Facebook.
Jackie had
papers.
mentioned
and you
that if
mentioning our charming
Jackie.
personalities.
she had suggested that, you know, even if they didn't put it on their
Yeah.
application
Yeah.
as their 3, that you would still suggest, you
Yeah,
know,
and then
okay,
I will
very
say
good.
too, right now we do have a new group in the Citizens Academy, so I'm
There
wondering
it
if
is.
once they get through that, maybe we'll have some additional.
That should do it. And then they can sit here for 10,000 years.
No, I mean, we are lovely. I
Your
don't
service is
understand.
appreciated.
I appreciate
And we do
that.
have an application next month, so you have to come.
I
Unless
know,
it's
I
withdrawn.
already heard.
Just one though.
Okay, fantastic.
So
That's
far.
all I have, thank you.
All right, well, let's go ahead and call for adjournment at 7:49 PM. Okay, I guess I do my little,
All right.
there we go, bam.
Okay, then.
Ms. Kim, I signed that for you.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Right? Really feel like a hell of a.
Well, you're welcome back anytime.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks for
Thank you,
having
sir.
me. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks for your help. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no
it.
problem. All right. Shut this.
We had a nice meeting though, regardless.
Oh, I know. Just like hold off a little bit.
the first one was the longest one, and then the rest of it.
Yeah, well, they had to take the
Oh,
energy
you're
from the
welcome. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know I'm always the bearer of bad news when I review those permits.
Are
But
you doing